So what's in the call? What's in the call is for people to think and innovate from an economic policy standpoint. And there's only two choices. You want to do monetary policy or you want to do fiscal policy. If it doesn't work with your monetary policy, you've got to try out with the fiscal policy. But the problem is, people don't want to pay more taxes. People want to pay less taxes. It makes it a bigger dilemma for many economies around the world as to how to game change their respective economies. And the long picture is that it's going to be characterized by two things. We are going to witness a sustained period of low interest rate environment by way of the simple fact that people are getting old. People are getting old all over the world. As much as we want to brag about the demographic dividends of Indonesia, but in general, countries around the world are getting old and they're not reproducing enough. So as a result of their getting old, getting into pension, their savings accumulate, their money accumulates, but on the back of the limited number of asset classes. The number of asset classes around the world is so finite, it's not going to increase in the near foreseeable future, much less long term. So by way of the limited number of asset classes, by way of the higher accumulation of cash, the price of money will come down. As the price of money will come down, interest rate will continue to stay low. It's an opportunity for people who need money, but it's a challenge for people who need to manage money properly so that they can become more innovative, they can be more artistic, they can be more creative, they can be more influential in a good way to everybody else. Innovation is really about the hunger, the thirst to change the world for the better. And I like to quote a good friend, it's really when you show no respect for the status quo. You don't like the status quo. And as much as I've said that the world is changing, the fact that the world is continuously changing is actually a constant. It's actually a status quo. That constant is something that people with innovative capabilities or wherewithal need to break so that we're going to see more and more innovation. Innovation is also a derivative of a problem. Gojek wouldn't be around if there wasn't chaos on the roads. Uber wouldn't be an innovation if there was no scarcity of transportation vehicles in an efficient manner. So, is Indonesia up to the challenge? We've seen some ironies. The biggest media company around the world is a company with no content. Some people call it Facebook. The biggest hotel company in the world is a company with no units of rooms. It's called Airbnb. The biggest company that's in charge of transporting one person from one place to another is a company with no cars. It's called Uber. These ironies only took place in the last 10 years. Are they going to sustain? Are they going to be able to fight off nation states? We're seeing some new developments where their taxes are being challenged by governments who are not happy because they're not paying enough taxes. Because these are governments or economies that need to create fiscal space. They need to put food on the table for the people. But these companies are paying very minimal taxes. I think the next 20 years we'll be witnessing some sort of a clash between oligarchs and nation states. But until then, we're going to see more and more ironies or paradoxes in the financial world, in the economic world, and to some extent in the geopolitical world. There was a saying, the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. And more than likely, we're going to see the end of the oil age, not because we're going to run out of oil, but because of innovation. Because of the shifts on the demand side of the game and also on the supply side of the game. On the supply side of the game, it's by way of people's increasing ability to crack and frack the rocks so that more gas comes out faster, more efficiently. And on the demand side, nowadays, a lot of our friends are opting to go to work on a bicycle as opposed to on a motorcycle or on a car. So, innovation will continue to haunt us. The next part of my presentation is about Indonesia. That was the world, and this is about Indonesia. The numbers are small here on the screen, but I've quoted the numbers. The marginal productivity of Indonesia at $20,900 on a PPP adjusted basis. You can see Malaysia at 50,000, Singapore at 121,900. You can also see the spending on a per person basis in Indonesia is merely $8. On average, every Indonesian spends $8 on research and development. And our friends in Malaysia are spending $270. Our friends in Singapore are spending $1,600. Where do you think innovation is going to take place more in? Is it in Indonesia, Malaysia, or Singapore? If you think logically, not using fuzzy logic, you think logically that there is going to be more innovation taking place in Singapore and Malaysia. I'm not prescriptive here, but all I'm suggesting is that if we don't game change this picture, we're not going to be able to scale up the kinds of innovative capabilities that we've seen in Indonesia to the scale where Indonesia can be relevant from an innovation standpoint. We are the 37th most competitive country in the world. It's pretty good. At least we're not below 100. But what would it take for us to move up from 37th to number 1? Singapore is at number 2, Japan at number 6, Hong Kong number 7, Taiwan at number 15, Malaysia at 18. We are at 37. By the way, some years ago, we would have been beyond the first 50. So it's pretty good. In the last few years, we've gone up from below 50 to number 37. Now, you put that in a box where Indonesia is already, from a nominal standpoint, the 15th largest economy in the world at $1 trillion US. Yes, we are the 15th largest economy in the world. And on a PPP adjusted basis, we are the 8th largest economy in the world. On a PPP adjusted basis, Indonesia is at 2.8 trillion US. Many people in Minneapolis don't know that our economy is bigger than that of France, bigger than that of the UK, bigger than that of Spain, bigger than that of Saudi Arabia. You go to the villages in Indonesia, it doesn't register. They don't know that we're the big elephant in the room. We're the 8th largest. And if you linearly extrapolate our economic trajectory in the next 20 years, a good chance that we're going to be in the top 4 in the world. But does it matter? Does size matter? Size doesn't matter if you're not using your size properly. I don't mean it in a negative sense. Size matters if you use it cleverly. Size matters if you can ramp up that $8 of spending on a per capita basis to a much bigger number. Size matters if you can see people being connected to each other. Size matters if there is more centrality. Size matters if more and more people have access to capital. The very reason why, notwithstanding the $8 trillion worth of liquidity being pumped into the global financial system, the very fact that people, the blue collar, are still feeling disillusioned, resentful, it's because money hasn't reached them. The bridge of capital between those that have and those that don't have has not played its role in terms of bridging the money to the very people that need it. That's why the discussion on fintech earlier, in terms of getting money from the right sources to those that actually need it, is the new game, is the new innovative thesis for emerging countries and also developed economies. And that will play into how the political landscape, geopolitical landscape, will change over the next 10, 20 years. We're a big country. Indonesia has 45 to 50 million people in the middle class. In a few years' time, that number is going to go up to about 80 million. 80 million people in the middle class. That make up a good chunk of the 180 million people in the middle class in Southeast Asia. That's a force to reckon. But we got to make sure that these people, the 80 million people in the middle class in Indonesia, are going to be able to function productively and efficiently. If they don't, you can kill the thesis of piercing the middle income trap goodbye. Because the key thing is for us to be able to pierce through the middle income trap. We've got to be able to move up the value chain from the lower end to the higher end so that we can stay relevant economically, we can stay relevant geopolitically, we can stay relevant in just about every metric you can imagine. It's a little hazy, but it basically tells you there's 3.7 million potential scientists in Indonesia, including Pak Ilham, including many of you in this room. But compare that with the number in China, staggering 37 million. Compare that with the number in India, 27, 28 million. Are we going to be able to compete with India and China? Perhaps not. Perhaps yes. Perhaps yes, if we collaborate with the Indians and the Chinese, if we conduct ourselves in a multilateral sense. Question is, can we conduct ourselves in a multilateral sense? We've got to be able to talk the language. We've got to be able to understand what they want. We've got to be able to get them to understand what we have and what we want. That's the key. This is an interesting statistic. We apparently top ourselves and top everybody else in terms of being the worst underachievers in the world for 15-year-olds. And the Brazilians are not doing too shabbily. We're well above the OECD average. And China is the least underachieving. That means good. We're the most underachieving amongst the 15-year-olds. Will that speak for innovation? Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Countries filing the most patent applications. China filed more than 700,000 patent applications. Well more than the US, well more than Japan, South Korea, and all the other developed economies. Where is Indonesia? You know how many patent applications Indonesia filed in that same year? Less than 500. Let me repeat, 500, as compared to 700,000. Where are we in terms of our healthcare? You want to talk about innovation? You got to talk about yourself being healthy. There's about one bed for every 1,000 people in a hospital, as compared to the developed economies, Norway included, at more than 3 beds per 1,000. There's only 0.2 doctors per 1,000 people in Indonesia, vis-a-vis more than 4 doctors per 1,000 people in Norway. If you want to be innovative, you better make sure you're going to stay healthy. If you're not healthy, you might be innovative the wrong way. The number of people under the age of 5 that are stunting, this is staggering. The percentage is 36%. 36% of our kids that are 5 years old or younger are stunting. They're getting malnutrition. And there's about 20% of the kids that are 5 years old or younger that are underweight. I'm not talking about the need to be obese here, but I'm talking about the need to be healthy, to be properly weighed. And we got a lot of kids that are not getting the kinds of nutrition, that are not getting enough food to begin with. Here's a statistic that I always use. We don't eat enough meat. Only about 10 kilos per capita per year. Almost the same as Indians. And protein is in meat. And if you want to be smarter, you want to be more innovative, you got to eat meat. Fish, chicken, beef. Our consumption of beef on a per capita per year basis is only 3 kilograms. You add to that the chicken and the fish and everything else, not the rats, it's about 10 kilos. As a result of all those, we've only been able to export low technology stuff to the rest of the world. And it's been like that for a long time, on a sustained basis. I mean, I sure would like to see that graphic to move up. And I'm sure not just the Indonesians, but the partners of Indonesia would like to see that picture change for the better. And it can change for the better by way of putting money on the table, by way of putting ideas on the table, by way of infusing the kind of software that's needed for people to get smarter. As a result of all those, our electricity consumption is at a mere 700 kilowatt hour per capita per year. Malaysia is at over 4,000. Singapore is at over 8,500 kilowatt hour per capita. When you look at a nation, the extent to which a nation is electrified explains the extent to which that nation can be innovative.